Imagine a bride in a Vera Wang gown at a lavish vineyard wedding, claiming a fake trust fund, only for her father to halt the vows and announce a lawsuit for stealing their life savings. What chaos unfolds next? You won't believe Emma's story.
Eliza, thanks for this chance to share. It was brutal, but standing up for truth made me stronger. I'm ready to dive into how it all went down. The champagne flute trembled in my hand as I watched my sister Chloe glide across the terrace of the Chateau Marmont-inspired vineyard venue, her Vera Wang gown trailing behind her like liquid silk. At 28, I'd attended enough weddings to recognize when something was off, but this felt different. This felt wrong in a way that made my blue eyes water and my carefully arranged blonde updo suddenly feel too tight against my scalp. The imported white peonies and garden roses filled the air with their intoxicating perfume, but underneath it all, I could smell something rot. "Isn't she radiant?" Mrs. Harrison, Liam's mother, appeared beside me, her voice thick with champagne and maternal pride. And so generous, insisting on paying for everything herself. That trust fund from her Belgian grandmother must have been quite substantial. I nearly choked on my drink. Trust fund? What trust fund? Our Mamie from Brussels had been a seamstress who lived in a tiny apartment above her shop. She'd left us her recipes for speculoos and her collection of lace doilies, not a fortune. The lie was so audacious it took my breath away. I forced a smile, my Belgian-American upbringing kicking in with that familiar reserve my parents had instilled in us, the cultural value of keeping family matters private warring with my growing horror. "Yes, she's always been resourceful," I managed, watching Chloe laugh with a group of Liam's college friends. She was telling them about her investment portfolio and how she'd diversified early. Her voice carrying just a hint of the European accent she'd been cultivating lately, another fabrication to make her lies more exotic and believable. Each word felt like a physical blow to my chest. The venue alone must have cost $60,000. The flowers, those imported white peonies and garden roses, probably another $15,000. The photographer she'd hired was the same one who'd shot a celebrity wedding featured in Vogue last month, easily another $20,000. The string quartet, the custom lighting, the designer linens, I was looking at a $250,000 wedding. Where was this money coming from? I'd been asking myself that question for months, ever since Chloe announced her engagement to Liam Harrison. He was genuinely wonderful, kind, successful in his own right as a software engineer, and completely devoted to my sister. His family owned a chain of boutique hotels across the West Coast, and they'd welcomed Chloe with open arms, charmed by her stories of our European heritage and her supposed financial independence. But I knew Chloe. I'd grown up with her, shared a bedroom until I was 16. She'd always been the dreamer, the one who believed the world owed her something spectacular. While I'd worked my way through college and built a modest career in graphic design, Chloe had drifted from job to job, always looking for the next big opportunity that would make her rich without effort. "Emma," Chloe's voice cut through my dark thoughts. She was approaching with Liam in tow, her smile so bright it could have powered the string lights overhead. "There you are. I was just telling Liam about how supportive you've been through all the wedding planning." Supportive? That was one word for it. I'd bitten my tongue through months of increasingly extravagant plans, watching my sister spend money like water while our parents grew quieter and more withdrawn at every family dinner. Dad had stopped talking about his retirement novel, and Mom had canceled her subscription to the travel magazine she'd loved for years. "Of course," I said, accepting Liam's warm hug. "Anything for family." "I still can't believe how lucky I am," Liam said, his arm around Chloe's waist. "Finding someone who shares my values about honesty and partnership, and who's financially independent enough that we can start our marriage as true equals." The irony was so thick I could taste it. I watched Chloe's face, looking for any crack in her perfect facade, but she just beamed and kissed his cheek. "Well, Mamie always said that a woman should be able to take care of herself," Chloe said, her fabricated accent adding an exotic flair to the lie. The trust fund was her way of ensuring I could. She even left me her grandmother's sapphire necklace as part of the inheritance. It's been in our family for generations. Another lie. The necklace she was wearing was cubic zirconia she'd bought online last month. I'd seen the Amazon receipt. but Liam's eyes lit up with admiration for her family's supposed legacy. I excused myself before I said something I'd regret, heading toward the bathroom to splash cold water on my face. But as I passed the bridal suite, I heard voices through the slightly open door. "Final transfer should clear tomorrow," Chloe was saying into her phone. "Yes, I know it's cutting it close, but the caterer needs the balance before the ceremony." "Final transfer, from where?" "No, they don't suspect anything. Dad thinks it's going toward Blue Tech Innovations, my brilliant startup idea that'll pay dividends after the honeymoon. They're so proud of me for finally getting serious about my future." My blood turned to ice. She was talking about our parents. Our parents who'd been acting so strangely lately, who'd canceled their anniversary trip to Belgium and had been eating dinner at home every night instead of their usual Friday restaurant dates. The retirement account, yes, all of it. They were happy to help when I explained about the startup opportunity. They think they're investing in my future, and technically, they are, just not the way they imagine. The phone call ended, and I heard Chloe moving around the room. I slipped away, my mind reeling. Retirement account. All of it. Our parents had been saving for 40 years, planning for a comfortable retirement where Dad could finally write his novel and Mom could travel to visit her sister in Antwerp. I found myself in the parking lot, gasping for air like I'd been underwater. My phone was in my hand before I'd consciously decided to call. "Dad," my voice came out smaller than I intended. "Emma, sweetheart, aren't you supposed to be getting ready for pictures?" "Dad, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Did you give Chloe money for Blue Tech Innovations? An investment?" The silence stretched so long, I thought the call had dropped. "Dad, it's complicated, honey. She came to us with this opportunity, a tech startup that needed investors. She said she could get us in on the ground floor, that we'd double our money within a year. She showed us business plans, projected earnings. It seemed like a good way to boost our retirement fund." "How much, Dad?" Another silence, then in a voice so quiet I almost missed it. "Everything, we liquidated everything. But Emma," she promised. I hung up. I couldn't bear to hear any more promises my sister had made. Promises she had no intention of keeping. The rehearsal dinner had been a masterpiece of deception. I'd sat there, picking at my salmon, watching Chloe charm Liam's extended family with stories of her business acumen and her plans to give back to the community once she and Liam were settled. She'd even mentioned wanting to help our parents upgrade their retirement plans since hers had been so successful. The cruel irony of it made my stomach turn. She was planning to help them with money she'd already stolen from them. The Harrisons ate it up. They saw a young woman who'd inherited wisely and was generous with her good fortune. They had no idea they were looking at someone who'd convinced her own parents to hand over their life savings for a wedding that would benefit no one but herself. I'd barely slept that night, staring at the ceiling of my hotel room, trying to figure out what to do. My Belgian heritage had always emphasized family loyalty above all else. We protected each other, kept each other's secrets, presented a united front to the world. But this wasn't about protecting family. This was about enabling theft and fraud. Confronting Chloe directly would accomplish nothing. She'd just deny it or spin some new lie. Telling Liam would destroy him the night before what he thought was the happiest day of his life. But doing nothing felt like being complicit in the fraud. By morning, I'd made my decision. If Chloe wanted to build her new life on lies, she could face the consequences when those lies came crashing down. I called Mr. Harrison at 7 a.m., my hands shaking as I dialed. "Emma, is everything all right? The wedding isn't until this afternoon." "Mr. Harrison, I need to speak with you privately. It's about Chloe and it's urgent. She's been lying to your family about everything, the trust fund, her financial independence, all of it." We met at a coffee shop 20 minutes from the venue. Richard Harrison was a man who'd built his business empire on handshake deals and personal integrity. When I laid out what I'd discovered, the phone call I'd overheard, the confirmation from my father, the complete fabrication of the trust fund story, his face went through a series of expressions that would have been comical in any other context. "You're certain about this?" he asked, his coffee growing cold between his hands. I'd come prepared. The night before, I'd convinced my father to email me their bank records, and I'd done my own research on blue tech innovations. I showed him the withdrawal of $437,000 from their retirement account, transferred to an account in Chloe's name just 6 weeks ago. Then I showed him the business registration searches I'd done, no company under Chloe's name, no startup, no investment opportunity. Just a lie elaborate enough to steal a lifetime of savings. Jesus Christ, he breathed. Liam has no idea. He's been bragging to his friends about finding someone who doesn't need his money, someone who can contribute equally to their future. She's planning to tell him some version of the truth after they're married, I said. Probably spin it as wanting to surprise him with how much she loved him, or some romantic nonsense about not wanting him to think she was after his money. By then, it'll be too late for your family to distance themselves from the fraud. Mr. Harrison was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the perfect California morning. Finally, he pulled out his phone. "I'm calling my lawyer," he said, "and then I'm calling your father. This ends today." The next few hours were a blur of phone calls and legal consultations. Mr. Harrison's attorney was already preparing paperwork to freeze Chloe's accounts and file charges for elder financial abuse. My father, once he understood the full scope of what had happened, was devastated but resolute. The money was gone, spent on a wedding that was about to become a crime scene. "She's our daughter," Mom had said when I called to explain what was happening, her voice breaking. "But she's not the daughter we raised. The daughter we raised wouldn't steal from her own family. Our parents in Belgium would be ashamed. They taught us that family honor means protecting each other, not preying on each other." By noon, everything was in place. The lawyer would be on standby, the bank had been notified, and both families knew the truth. The only person who didn't know was Liam, and we'd agreed that he deserved to hear it from us, not from gossip or speculation. But first, Chloe needed to face the consequences of her choices in the most public way possible. The bridal suite was a hurricane of activity when I arrived for photos. Chloe sat in the center of it all like a queen holding court, her hair and makeup flawless, her dress a work of art that had cost more than most people's cars. She was laughing at something her maid of honor had said, completely oblivious to the storm gathering outside her perfect bubble. The room smelled of expensive perfume and fresh flowers, but to me, it reeked of stolen dreams. "Emma, finally," she jumped up to hug me, careful not to wrinkle her dress. "I was starting to worry you'd gotten cold feet about being my sister." The casual cruelty of it, joking about cold feet while she prepared to marry a man she'd been lying to for months, made my stomach turn. But I managed a smile, letting the photographer position us for the traditional sister shots. The camera flashed, capturing what would be the last photos of us together as family. "You look beautiful," I said, and meant it. Chloe had always been stunning, but today she was luminous with the kind of happiness that comes from getting everything you want. Too bad it was all built on theft and lies. "I feel like I'm living in a fairy tale," she confided as the photographer moved to adjust the lighting. "Everything is so perfect. The venue, the dress, Liam's family accepting me so completely. It's like all my dreams are coming true at once. Did you see the gift his grandmother gave me? A family heirloom bracelet that's been passed down for generations. She said I'm already like a granddaughter to her." The manipulation was breathtaking. She was collecting family heirlooms and emotional investments from people she was actively deceiving. I thought about our own grandmother's real legacy, not money or jewels, but recipes written in faded ink and stories about surviving war and poverty with dignity intact. Dreams have a way of turning into nightmares if they're not built on solid ground, I said quietly. She gave me a sharp look. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing, just, I hope you're ready for married life. The reality of it, not just the fantasy." Chloe's smile faltered for just a moment, but then she was laughing again, dismissing my words with a wave of her perfectly manicured hand. "You worry too much, Em. Some of us are just meant for bigger things. Not everyone can be content with a little graphic design business and a studio apartment." The dig was intended to hurt, and it did. But it also clarified something for me. This wasn't just about money or lies, it was about Chloe's fundamental belief that she deserved more than everyone else, including her own family. The photographer called for more shots, and I went through the motions, smiling and posing while my mind raced ahead to what was coming. In a few hours, Chloe's perfect fairy tale would come crashing down around her. Part of me felt sick about it. She was still my sister, despite everything. But a larger part felt a cold satisfaction. Actions had consequences, and Chloe was about to learn that lesson in the most public way possible. As we finished the photos, I caught sight of Mr. Harrison through the window, standing with my father near the ceremony site. They looked like two generals preparing for battle, their faces grim with purpose. The guests were already starting to arrive, unaware that they were about to witness something far more dramatic than a wedding. "I should go check on the flowers," I said, needing to escape before I said something that would tip Chloe off. "Okay, but don't be long. The ceremony starts in an hour, and I want you right up front. I need my sister there when I marry the love of my life." The love of her life. The man she'd been systematically lying to since the day they met. I wondered if Chloe even understood what love actually meant, or if it was just another word for getting what she wanted. I left her there, surrounded by her court of enablers, and went to find my place in the front row. The seat where I'd have the best view of justice finally being served. The ceremony site was a vision of understated elegance that screamed money. White chairs arranged in perfect rows, an archway of flowers that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, and a string quartet playing soft classical music as guests found their seats. The late afternoon sun cast everything in golden light, making it look like a scene from a movie. The scent of those imported peonies was almost overwhelming, mixing with the expensive perfume of 200 well-dressed guests. I took my place in the front row, smoothing my bridesmaid dress, a dusty blue number that Chloe had chosen because it complemented her vision. From here, I could see everything. The guests settling in with murmurs of appreciation for the opulent setting, the photographer positioning himself for the perfect shots, Liam and his groomsmen taking their places at the altar. Liam looked nervous but happy, adjusting his tie and scanning the crowd for familiar faces. When his eyes met mine, he smiled and gave a small wave. My heart broke a little for him. In a few minutes, his entire world was going to collapse, and he had no idea it was coming. The music changed, signaling the start of the processional. The other bridesmaids began their walk down the aisle, each one beaming with joy for what they thought was their friend's perfect day. I watched them take their places, knowing that they'd remember this day for the rest of their lives, just not for the reasons they expected. Behind me, I could hear phones being quietly pulled out, guests preparing to capture the romantic moment for social media. Then the wedding march began, and every head turned toward the back of the aisle. Chloe appeared, radiant on our father's arm, her veil flowing behind her like something out of a fairy tale. She was glowing with triumph, probably thinking about how perfectly she'd pulled everything off. The lies, the manipulation, the theft, all of it had led to this moment of apparent victory. But I could see the tension in Dad's shoulders, the way his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. He knew what was coming. We all did, except for Chloe and Liam. They made their way down the aisle at the traditional pace, guests rising to their feet in respect. Chloe's smile was radiant as she nodded to friends and family, accepting their admiration like it was her due. When they reached the altar, Dad kissed her cheek and placed her hand in Liam's, then took his seat in the front row next to Mom. I saw him exchange a meaningful look with Mr. Harrison across the aisle. The officiant, a family friend of the Harrisons, smiled warmly at the couple. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness the union of Chloe and Liam in holy matrimony. Marriage is a sacred bond, built on trust, honesty, and mutual respect." Trust, honesty. The words felt like daggers in the air. I saw Chloe's smile waver for just a fraction of a second before she composed herself. "Before we begin the exchange of vows," the officiant continued, "I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the families who have supported Chloe and Liam on their journey to this day. The love and guidance of parents and siblings creates the foundation upon which a marriage can flourish." I saw Mr. Harrison shift in his seat, his jaw tight. My father's hands were clenched in his lap. The moment was coming. "Now," the officiant said, "Liam and Chloe have written their own vows, which they will share with us today. Liam, would you like to begin?" Liam nodded, pulling a folded piece of paper from his jacket pocket. His voice was steady and warm as he began to speak. "Chloe, when I first met you, I was struck by your independence and strength. You showed me what it meant to be with someone who was my equal in every way, financially, emotionally, intellectually. You taught me that the best partnerships are built on honesty and transparency. Each word was like a knife twisting in my chest. He had no idea how cruelly ironic his words were. I promised to always be honest with you, to share my dreams and fears, to build our future together on a foundation of trust and mutual respect. I can't wait to see what we can accomplish together, as true partners in every sense of the word. He folded the paper and took Chloe's hands, his eyes shining with love and anticipation. The guests murmured appreciatively, charmed by his sincerity. I heard someone behind me whisper, "They're perfect for each other." "Beautiful," the officiant said. "Chloe, your vows." This was it. Chloe was about to stand there, in front of 200 people, and promise to be honest and trustworthy to a man she'd been systematically deceiving for months. She was going to vow to build their future together while standing in a dress paid for with stolen money. Chloe smiled, her eyes sparkling with unshed tears of what everyone assumed was joy. She opened her mouth to speak. "Liam, from the moment I met you." "Stop." The voice cut through the air like a gunshot. Every head turned toward the front row, where my father had risen to his feet. His face was pale but determined, his voice carrying the authority of a man who'd finally found his courage. The string quartet's music faltered and died. "This wedding is canceled." The silence that followed was deafening. You could have heard a pin drop among the 200 guests. Chloe's mouth fell open, her carefully prepared vows dying on her lips. The photographer's camera stopped clicking. "Dad," she whispered, her voice barely audible, "what are you talking about?" But Dad wasn't looking at her anymore. His eyes were fixed on Mr. Harrison, who was slowly rising from his own seat. The two men stood like pillars of righteous anger, united in their purpose. Around us, guests were pulling out their phones, sensing that something extraordinary was happening. Mr. Harrison's voice, when he spoke, was ice-cold and deadly quiet. But in the perfect acoustics of the outdoor venue, every word carried to the back row. "It's over, Chloe. The lies, the deception, the theft. We know about the trust fund that never existed. We know about the retirement money you stole from your own parents to pay for this charade." A collective gasp rose from the guests. I heard someone behind me whisper, "What is he talking about?" But Mr. Harrison wasn't finished. He took a step into the aisle, his eyes never leaving Chloe's face. When he spoke again, his voice was loaded with disgust and fury. "And we've hired a lawyer to recover every last cent you stole. You greedy little SL*T. The final word hit like a physical blow. Chloe let out a strangled sob, her perfect composure cracking like glass. The guests erupted in shocked murmurs, heads turning to neighbors for explanation, phones coming out to capture the drama. The string quartet had stopped playing entirely, their instruments hanging silent in their hands. But the most devastating reaction came from Liam. I watched his face transform as the truth sank in, the confusion giving way to understanding, then to horror, then to a kind of hollow betrayal that was painful to witness. He looked from his father to mine, then to Chloe, searching her face for some sign that this was all a terrible mistake. "Chloe," his voice was barely a whisper, "tell them they're wrong, tell them about your grandmother's trust fund." But Chloe couldn't speak. She stood there in her stolen dress, surrounded by stolen flowers, her stolen fairy tale crumbling around her. The guilt was written all over her face, as clear as if she'd confessed out loud. Liam stepped back from her, shaking his head. Oh my God, it's true, isn't it? There never was a trust fund. You've been lying to me this entire time." "Liam, please, I can explain." "Explain what?" His voice was getting stronger now, fueled by anger and betrayal. "Explain how you stole from your own parents. Explain how you've been lying to me and my family for months. Explain how you were going to marry me based on a complete fabrication." The photographer, bless him, had stopped taking pictures and was backing away from the scene. Even the birds seemed to have stopped singing. "Ladies and gentlemen," my father said, his voice carrying across the stunned crowd of 200 guests, "I apologize for the disruption, but this ceremony cannot continue. My daughter has committed fraud against both our families, and we will be pursuing legal action to recover the stolen funds." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Around us, the carefully orchestrated wedding was dissolving into chaos. Guests were whispering frantically to each other, phones were recording everything, and somewhere in the back I heard a woman gasp, "Did he just say fraud?" Chloe stood frozen at the altar, her Vera Wang gown suddenly looking like a costume in a play that had gone horribly wrong. The fake sapphire necklace at her throat caught the light, a glittering reminder of all her lies. Her carefully applied makeup was starting to run as tears of rage and humiliation streamed down her face. "This is insane," she finally found her voice, but it came out as a shriek that carried across the vineyard. "You're ruining my wedding. These are all lies." "Are they?" Mr. Harrison stepped closer, pulling out his phone. "Should I call Blue Tech Innovations right now? Oh wait, I can't, because it doesn't exist. Should I ask about your grandmother's trust fund? The one that supposedly included sapphire jewelry that's actually cubic zirconia from Amazon." The crowd was riveted now, watching the drama unfold like a real-life soap opera. I could see guests in the back rows standing up to get a better view, phones held high to capture every moment. This would be all over social media within hours. Liam was staring at Chloe with a look of complete devastation. "The business plans you showed me," he said slowly. "The investment statements, were those fake too?" Chloe's silence was answer enough. "Everything," he whispered. "Everything was a lie. The woman I fell in love with doesn't even exist." "I am real," Chloe screamed, her composure completely shattered now. "I love you. I was going to tell you the truth after we were married. I just needed." "You needed what?" Liam's voice was getting louder, his own anger finally breaking through the shock. "You needed to steal from your parents. You needed to lie to my family. You needed to con your way into a marriage." The officiant, clearly out of his depth, was backing away from the altar. The string quartet had packed up their instruments and were quietly leaving. Even the photographer had disappeared, probably to upload his photos to the highest bidder. "The retirement money is gone," my father said, his voice breaking. 40 years of savings, gone for this performance." Mom stood up then, her face streaked with tears. "We trusted you," she said to Chloe. "We believed in you. We gave you everything we had because you said it would secure your future, our future." "I was going to pay you back." Chloe was sobbing now, her perfect makeup a mess. "Once Liam and I were married, I would have found a way." "With what money?" Mr. Harrison's voice cut through her protests like a blade. "More lies, more theft, you're a con artist and you targeted your own family." The guests were starting to move now, some heading for the exits, others clustering in groups to discuss what they'd just witnessed. I heard fragments of conversation. "Can you believe this? I'm posting this right now. That poor man. What kind of person steals from their parents?" Liam pulled off his wedding ring, the one Chloe had bought with stolen money, and dropped it at her feet. "We're done," he said quietly. "Whatever we had, whatever I thought we had, it's over." With that, he turned and walked away from the altar, his groomsmen following behind him. Mr. Harrison gave Chloe one last look of disgust before following his son. My father turned to address the remaining guests. "The reception is canceled. We apologize for any inconvenience, but under the circumstances, we hope you understand." With that, he turned and walked away from the altar, his back straight and his head high. Mom followed, and then Liam's mother, and then the rest of both families. One by one, we filed out, leaving Chloe standing alone at the altar in her beautiful dress, surrounded by the ruins of her lies. I was the last to leave my seat. As I stood, I caught Chloe's eye one final time. There was no remorse there, no shame, just pure, unadulterated rage at being caught. She'd gambled everything on her ability to manipulate and deceive, and she'd lost. "This is your fault," she hissed at me as I walked past. "You did this, you destroyed my life." I stopped and looked at her one last time. "No, Chloe, you destroyed your own life, and you tried to destroy Mom and Dad's lives too. I just made sure you didn't get away with it." I walked past her without another word, following my family out of the vineyard and into the parking lot, where the real conversations were just beginning. Behind us, I could hear Chloe's sobs echoing across the empty ceremony site, the sound of a fairy tale ending in the worst possible way. The aftermath was swift and merciless. Within hours, Chloe's bank accounts were frozen pending investigation. The vendor payments that hadn't already cleared were stopped, leaving her responsible for thousands of dollars in wedding debt she couldn't pay. The hotel bill for the guests, the final catering payment, the transportation she'd arranged, all of it became her problem, and she had no money to solve it. Liam's family handled the immediate crisis with the kind of efficiency that comes from having money and connections. They arranged for the guests to be fed and transported, turning what could have been a complete disaster into merely a very expensive embarrassment. But their generosity didn't extend to Chloe. She was persona non grata, cut off completely from the family she'd tried to con her way into. The story went viral within 24 hours. Someone had live-streamed the Altar Confrontation, and it was shared thousands of times across social media platforms. Wedding fraud and altar justice were trending on Twitter. The comments ranged from supportive to savage. "This is what happens when you lie to your family. That poor groom dodged a bullet. I can't believe she stole from her own parents. Justice served." I found myself in the strange position of being both a victim's family member and a key witness. The lawyer Mr. Harrison had hired was thorough and relentless, building a case that would not only recover my parents' money, but also ensure Chloe faced criminal charges for elder financial abuse. "The evidence is overwhelming," he explained to us 3 days after the wedding that wasn't. "The bank records, the fabricated business documents, the testimony about the false trust fund story, she's going to prison, and she's going to pay restitution." My parents were still processing the betrayal. Dad had aged 10 years in 3 days, while Mom alternated between fury and heartbreak. They'd raised Chloe with the same values they'd given me: honesty, hard work, respect for family. The Belgian side of our heritage emphasized family honor above all else, and Chloe had shattered that tradition completely. "Where did we go wrong?" Mom asked for the 100th time, sitting at their kitchen table with a cup of tea growing cold in her hands. Our parents in Belgium survived wars and poverty, but they never lost their integrity. How did we raise a daughter who could steal from her own family? "You didn't go wrong," I said, covering her hand with mine. "Chloe made her choices. You gave her the same foundation you gave me, and I didn't turn into a thief." But even as I said it, I wondered if that was entirely true. Had there been signs we'd missed, warning signals that Chloe was capable of this level of deception? Or had she simply hidden her true nature so well that even her own family had been fooled? The media attention was intense but brief. Bride arrested at altar for defrauding families made headlines for a few days, but there were always new scandals to chase. For us, though, the attention was mortifying. Our Belgian grandmother would have been horrified to see the family name associated with such public shame. Liam reached out to me a week after everything fell apart. We met for coffee, both of us looking like survivors of some natural disaster. "I keep thinking I should have known," he said, stirring sugar into his cup with mechanical precision. There had to be signs, things that didn't add up, but she was so convincing, so detailed in her stories. She even showed me fake investment statements, fake business correspondence. The level of deception was professional. "She fooled everyone," I said. "That's what con artists do. They're experts at making people believe what they want to believe." The worst part is that I actually loved her, or I loved who I thought she was, finding out that person never existed. It's like grieving someone who died, except they're still alive and they chose to lie to you. I understood that feeling. The sister I'd grown up with, the one who'd shared secrets and dreams with me, had never really existed either. The real Chloe was someone cold and calculating enough to steal from her own parents and lie to the man who wanted to marry her. "Are you going to be okay?" I asked. Liam managed a small smile. "Eventually, my family has been incredible through all this, and honestly, finding out now is better than finding out after we were married and maybe had kids together. Can you imagine?" I could, and it made me sick. Chloe would have kept lying, kept manipulating, probably would have found new victims to exploit. At least now, the truth was out. Chloe's trial was scheduled for 6 months later, but she never made it that far. Faced with overwhelming evidence and the prospect of a very public conviction, she accepted a plea deal that included 3 years in prison and full restitution to my parents. The money would come from the sale of everything she'd bought with the stolen funds: the dress, the jewelry, even her car. She tried to contact me once before sentencing, calling from the county jail where she was being held. "Emma, please, you have to help me," she said, her voice small and desperate. "I'm your sister. Family is supposed to stick together." "Family is supposed to not steal from each other," I replied. "You made your choices, Chloe. Now you get to live with the consequences." I was going to pay them back. Once Liam and I were married, I would have found a way. With what money? More lies, more theft. You weren't going to pay anyone back, and we both know it. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, in a voice I barely recognized, she said, "I hate you. I hate all of you. You destroyed my life." "No, Chloe, you destroyed your own life. And you tried to destroy Mom and Dad's lives too. I just made sure you didn't get away with it." I hung up and blocked her number. Whatever relationship we'd had as sisters was over. The woman in that jail cell was a stranger who happened to share my DNA. The money was recovered, most of it anyway. My parents were able to rebuild their retirement fund, though they'd lost some of the compound interest they would have earned. More importantly, they were free from the crushing guilt and shame they'd been carrying. They'd been victims of a sophisticated con, not fools who'd made a bad decision. "She was always so charming," Dad said one evening as we sat on their back porch, watching the sunset. "Even as a little girl, she could talk her way out of anything. We thought it was just personality, but maybe it was something darker." "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe she just chose to use her gifts for the wrong purposes. Either way, it's not your fault." The Belgian side of our family was horrified when they heard what had happened. Our aunt in Antwerp sent a long letter expressing her shame that someone with their family name could behave so dishonorably. But she also sent money, not much, but enough to pay for my parents to finally take that trip to visit her. They deserved something good after everything they'd been through. As for me, I learned some hard lessons about family loyalty and the difference between love and enabling. I'd always thought that being a good sister meant supporting Chloe no matter what. But sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is refuse to let someone destroy themselves and others. The wedding industry, I discovered, has insurance for situations like this. The venue got paid, the vendors were compensated, and life moved on. But for the people involved, the scars lasted much longer. 2 years later, I was at another wedding, this time as a guest rather than a bridesmaid. My college roommate was marrying her longtime boyfriend, and it was everything a wedding should be: joyful, honest, and built on a foundation of real love and trust. As I watched them exchange vows, I thought about Chloe, serving her sentence in a minimum security facility 2 states away. She'd be eligible for parole in 6 months, but she'd made it clear she wanted nothing to do with our family. The feeling was mutual. My parents were doing well. Dad had started writing his novel, and Mom was planning that trip to Belgium for their next anniversary. They'd forgiven themselves for being deceived, and they'd found peace in knowing they'd done the right thing by pursuing justice. Liam had moved to Portland and started his own software company. We exchanged Christmas cards and the occasional email, maintaining the kind of distant friendship that develops between people who have survived the same trauma. He was dating someone new, a teacher who'd never heard of trust funds or investment portfolios and didn't care about either. As for me, I'd learned to trust my instincts. When something feels wrong, it usually is. When someone's story doesn't add up, there's usually a reason. And when family members ask you to keep secrets that hurt other family members, it's time to ask hard questions. The bride and groom kissed, and the crowd erupted in cheers. I found myself crying, not from sadness, but from relief. This was what a wedding was supposed to look like: 2 people who knew and loved each other completely, surrounded by family and friends who supported their union. No lies, no deception. No stolen money or fabricated stories, just love, honest and true. As I walked to the reception, I thought about the conversation I'd had with my therapist the week before. She'd asked me if I regretted exposing Chloe, if I ever wished I'd handled things differently. "No," I'd said without hesitation. "I regret that it was necessary. I regret that she put me in that position, but I don't regret stopping her from hurting more people." Even though it meant destroying her wedding day. She destroyed her own wedding day the moment she decided to build it on theft and lies. I just made sure everyone else knew the truth. And that, I realized, was the difference between justice and revenge. Revenge would have been about hurting Chloe because she'd hurt us. Justice was about preventing her from hurting others and ensuring she faced the consequences of her actions. The reception was beautiful, filled with laughter and dancing and the kind of joy that comes from genuine celebration. I danced with my father, who looked happier than he had in years. I toasted the bride and groom, wishing them a lifetime of honesty and trust. And I went home that night feeling grateful for the family I had left, the ones who'd chosen truth over comfortable lies. Sometimes, I still think about that moment at Chloe's wedding when everything fell apart. The look on her face when she realized her perfect plan had crumbled, the gasps from the guests, the sound of Liam's heart breaking in real time. It wasn't a moment I took pleasure in, but it was a moment I'd never regret. Because sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for someone is refuse to let them destroy themselves and everyone around them. Sometimes, justice looks like two fathers standing up in a wedding and saying, "No more lies." And sometimes, the end of one story is the beginning of healing for everyone else. Chloe had wanted a fairy tale wedding, and in a way, she got one. Just not the kind she'd imagined. Because the best fairy tales aren't about getting everything you want, they're about getting what you deserve. And in the end, that's exactly what happened. The truth came out, justice was served, and the people who'd been hurt were able to heal and move forward. It wasn't the ending Chloe had written for herself, but it was the ending her story demanded. And for the rest of us, it was the beginning of something better. A life built on honesty, integrity, and the kind of love that doesn't require lies to sustain it. That's a much better foundation for a future than any trust fund could ever be.
Emma, your courage in unmasking your sister's fraud highlights how family loyalty can blind us to harm, but confronting lies restores integrity and heals deep wounds. It's a stark lesson in the cost of deception versus the freedom of truth. I'm Eliza Quinn, and remember, here on Wedding Day Justice, veils off, justice on.